Just as Assassin's Creed 2 was coming out, a spin-off game called Bloodlines has now entered the market. A PSP exclusive, Bloodlines sees us in a direct sequel to the first game. Now, technically there's a DS game called Altair's Chronicles in between, but oh my god, it was impossible to play. The jaggies of the visuals and the shimmering just gave me a headache, so I couldn't proceed. So I guess we'll just have to live without it. I read the plot synopsis, and it's basically meaningless and quite boring to the franchise and Altair's story. We begin the game assaulting a keep to capture Maria, the woman who pretended to be the Sab in the first game. We capture her and get out to Cyprus, since the Templars literally purchased the island for their nefarious goals. Yep, a whole island. We arrive on the island and meet Alexander, who asks us to join him in the assassin safe house. Visually, it's a pretty game. Yeah, it's a PSP game, but it's the art style that still remains faithful to the first game. But yeah, expect terrible draw distance and enemies spawning right behind you at all times, which will annoy the hell out of you. Generally, you'll be in a city with a series of hubs separated by loading screens. Each area has a few side activities and a viewpoint. Surprisingly enough, there's even some context to all of these missions. Ideally, I'd even do most of them, but the main issue is that all the side activities have this mandatory stealth. Mandatory stealth plus no stealth mechanics plus guards spawning behind you equals misery. We contact a spy among the Templars who helps us infiltrate Limassol Castle. In the castle, we kill Frederick the Red, the commander of the local garrison. Returning from the castle, we see the safe house in flames and Maria gone. We encounter a man yelling for revenge for Frederick's death. That man is Armand Bouchard, the Grand Master of the Templars. During his speech, Maria arrives only to be captured by Templars. He assumes that Maria has turned sides, though it doesn't help that he's a raging misogynist. Time to rescue Maria. It's no longer safe here, so we charter a ship to go to the city of Carinia. Coincidentally, the same city where Bouchard went. In the city, we meet Barnabas, the leader of the local resistance. We do a job for him by interrogating a traitor called Jonas, who says that there's a bounty on our heads and it was placed by Moloch, a local warlord. Returning to the safe house, we learn that Jonas' death has led the city to a riot. After dealing with that filler, we go and deal with Moloch, though not before discovering that Barnabas has abandoned us during the riot. The fight with Moloch is some clunky stuff, as is most of the combat, which is just very rigid and unintuitive, but trust me, he is not the worst offender. We once again go back to our safe house, but surprise surprise, Maria was kidnapped along with the resistance fighters. That's kinda the trademark of the game, just a bunch of moments of Maria being in distress. How damselly of her. Also turns out that Barnabas wasn't Barnabas, since he had been killed the day before we even made it to the city. Time to rescue the men and the lass. The men are rescued, but Maria's somewhere in Bufavento prison. In there is a supposed dark oracle, so it's definitely worth checking out. We see Bouchard and another who talk about some delivery being sent to Alexander, the man in the first safe house. Going further into the castle, we find an oracle who supposedly has broken loose inside the prison, killing guards. We go and have a gander and oh yep, there she is. Honestly, this is just such a spin-off game. I mean, obviously, but what I mean is that it takes some crazy creative liberties with like crazy witches and fat men just like parading around. It's much less grounded than Assassin's Creed normally is, and you know, that's saying something. Also, it's a very straightforward story with like a goal revealing the next goal and so on. This boss fight's not a big problem, but it does show the clunkiness of the combat even more. Don't expect your counters to work like half the time, and don't think dodges matter, since if the game's decided you're gonna get hit, well, you're gonna get hit. It's clumsy and awkward, but it's serviceable for now. The music used in the game is literally just rips of the original soundtrack of the first game. Specifically, just a set of 5 or so tracks just repeated over and over. It's a good soundtrack, don't get me wrong, but considering how limited the track list is, they might as well have had something written for the game. Well, ding dong, the witch is dead, and we follow the unknown man who turns out to be Moloch's son, Shalim. Trailing kill stragglers repeats itself a few times, which is as boring as you can get. Assassin's Creed really digs into the infamous trailing missions as time goes on, so this isn't the last you've seen of these, or even the worst. Altair sees Maria, disguised as a woman of the night, and Altair secretly escorts her carriage to the safety in a mind-bogglingly badly designed defense mission. You go through multiple city regions, killing everyone on the map, only for enemies occasionally to spawn in to attack the carriage itself. It's so clumsy and so just clunky. A genuinely annoying series of escort missions. We follow them to a castle, infiltrate it, and confront Shalim. Turns out he's got a twin, and the person we're talking to is Shahar. Oh, and there's Maria. She fights off her captors, and we fight them together. Nah, I'm just kidding. She bails on us, leaving us to deal with both of them. Honestly, this is probably the most fun boss fight, since it's a single health bar for the both of them, which is a curious idea. After the fight, we learn that Karinia is liberated from the Templars, and so it's time to go back to Limassol. We confront Alexander, who instead blames us for the betrayal, since the package he received had nothing to do with betrayal, but was instead the head of the original Barnabas in a sack. Then a bunch of filler happens to find the location of Bouchard. In fact, the game starts doing this a lot after the escort. Basically, doing something multiple times just to pad out the game's length, which is already short. Around less than 4 hours in total, even with multiple deaths from the clunky climbing mechanics, the still absent swimming mechanics, and deaths in combat. By the way, Cyprus is an interesting location to set your game in. It's just a shame that it's a PSP game, since the most you'll get are square buildings and the occasional curious area. We get led to a merchant who worked with Bouchard. Before he can say much, he's killed by a mysterious Templar agent. We follow him, but lose his track quickly. Back at the safe house, we see a letter from Alexander, who asks us to meet him by the castle. We stumble upon Alexander's corpse and are confronted by the mysterious agent, who, in the meanwhile, has managed to turn a crowd of people against Altair, all ready to kill him. Altair uses the Apple of Eden he obtained from the first game to manipulate them into leaving him be and turn their attention to Bouchard. Guess he just, like, carries it around like a lucky charm or something? Anyways, the agent reveals himself to be the man pretending to be Barnabas, and he gets stabbed in the back by Maria, who tells us that there's an archive under the castle, which is supposedly full of knowledge on the apple and other artifacts. Making our way down the archive, we reach Bouchard and duel him. This is the worst boss fight I've played in a long while. His attacks have random range, reaching longer than the sword. Counters won't work most of the time, and his attacks can't be predicted since some unblockable attacks look exactly like the normal blockable attacks. Yeah, it's a travesty, and it just truly pulls apart the already flimsy combat and just rips it to tiny pieces. Also, he has endless Molotovs, but let's move on. With Bouchard defeated, he reveals to us that we've ruined the Templars' plans, and that they've forced to relocate all of the artifacts and many of the books. The archive starts collapsing, Maria and Altair make it out. The ending sees both of them discussing their future plan. East. Altair accompanies Maria, now disillusioned by the Templars and seeking meaning in her life. Bloodlines is messy, and honestly not the best game. But it is impressive what they managed to fit into a PSP. It's just a shame that they never ported it anywhere else. This game absolutely fills in some gaps in Altair's story, which isn't quite over yet. Gaps that are surprisingly important in the future, but I guess we finally have them filled, so it's time to move on to Assassin's Creed 2.
Memory log updated.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. These experiencing videos really range in difficulty, with some games needing an hour to be talked about, and some needing only a set of minutes. Regardless of the length, I hope you all agree that I shouldn't just stretch out the video if there isn't anything that stands out just to talk about something and add minutes to the videos. I tend to avoid even discussing anything that's completely expected and average, which is why sometimes I won't mention something about a game. In that case, just assume I found it to be exactly what I expected it to be, nothing more, nothing less. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and check out my other stuff like the first Assassin's Creed experiencing video that is actually a perfect example of not standing out with much, leading to a shorter video. Or instead check out my Saints Row 3 video, which is the longest video I've produced up until now, filled with stuff to talk about, though that will soon be dethroned by an already worked on project that requires even more time to discuss. Anyways, take care, have a good one.